deception plan.
Hello, hi. The pressure is building. There are lots of chemicals. I require a face-to-face with the top brass. I will be in London tomorrow.
The final act was as subtle as it was devastating. On the night of October 5th, Mrouan called his Mossad handler from Paris, but didn't use the agreed-upon code word for war, Ashligan, the boiler, a term chosen to signal imminent eruption. Instead, he used a vague warning: lots of chemicals. A signal of tension, but not certainty, not enough to trigger a full alert. He then requested a personal meeting with Mossad chief Zvi Zamir in London, delaying the delivery of critical information by nearly 24 hours. And even then, Mrouan misled him again, claiming the war would begin at sunset. But the attack came earlier, at 2 p.m. Those few hours proved decisive. They gave Egyptian forces the time they needed to cross the Suez Canal and establish a foothold before Israeli reservists could even reach the front. There's a saying, information is power. In the intelligence world, that usually means locking secrets away in a safe. But Sadat did the opposite. He opened the safe and let the Israelis look inside. What they saw appeared to be nothing more than small change, minor movements, scattered updates, fragments of plans. No big banknotes, no signs of war. And so they concluded, quite logically, that there was no war to prepare for. But this was the brilliance of the deception. As intelligence scholar Professor Michael Handel once wrote, "The ultimate deception is to conceal political and military intentions." Sadat didn't hide the safe. He emptied it of his true intentions and filled it with decoys. He used the power of information not to inform, but to sedate, and it worked. Israeli intelligence became overconfident, relying too heavily on a single trusted source, Mrouan, who ultimately misled them at the most critical moment. As military historians Elliot Cohen and John Gooch later observed, the Israeli failure stemmed not just from analytical mistakes, but from over-reliance on one source who failed when it mattered most. Sadat didn't rely on a single trick. He orchestrated a layered campaign built on 3 strategic deceptions, each more daring than the last. The first was designed to lull the Israeli army into a false sense of calm, ensuring a smooth Egyptian crossing of the Suez Canal. It culminated on Wednesday, October 3, 1973, when Egyptian intelligence concluded that Israeli forces had fallen into a deep slumber. The second ruse was psychological. It was designed to provoke Israel into starting the war themselves. To set this trap, Sadat dispatched اشرف Mrouan to London to meet Mossad chief Zvi Zamir with a dramatic warning: Egypt would go to war tomorrow. To understand the brilliance behind this move, one must go back to September 25, 1973, when King Hussein of Jordan secretly flew to Tel Aviv to warn Golda Meir of a looming Egyptian-Syrian attack. The king could have sent a messenger, but chose to come himself, signaling the seriousness of the threat. Sadat took note. By sending Zvi Zamir's most valuable source, a man with unfiltered access to Egypt's inner circle, Sadat ensured that the warning would land like a thunderclap. Only Zamir, a direct subordinate to the prime minister, could deliver such news to Mir in the dead of night, just hours before Yom Kippur began. The goal was to create shock, confusion, and panic, to push Israeli leaders into launching a preemptive airstrike, thereby making Israel appear as the aggressor. This would shift the moral and diplomatic burden onto Tel Aviv, alienating global allies, especially the United States. But Sadat was not gambling. Behind the Egyptian front lines stood the impressive SAM missile wall, a dense layer of surface-to-air defenses ready to shred Israeli aircraft. In fact, in just the first 3 days of the war, Israel lost around 60 fighter jets, representing roughly a quarter of its operational air force, despite being on the defensive. Had Israel launched the first strike, the results would likely have been the same, except Sadat would have emerged as a global statesman fighting in self-defense against aggression. In a 2011 interview with Ma'arif, Zvi Zamir recalled how, on October 12th, اشرف Marwan contacted him again, this time from Cairo, warning that Egyptian armored divisions were preparing a breakthrough in Sinai. Zamir posed a critical question. If Marwan could phone the Mossad from Cairo during the war, why had he insisted on an in-person meeting in London just hours before it began? The answer lay in intent. It's true that Marwan made the call and delivered the warning, but the plan wasn't his. The voice was Marwan's. The mind was Sadat's. And with that, the third deception was set in motion. Sadat had instructed Marwan to warn the Israelis to revive his credibility, which had taken a hit following earlier false alerts. Marwan had served Egypt's war plans masterfully. But Sadat had further plans for him. With the conflict underway, he wanted Marwan to remain a trusted source, a tool not only for war but for the peace phase that would follow. And once again, Sadat was not taking military risks lightly. According to Egyptian General Staff reports, he had full confidence that Egyptian armor could successfully breach Israeli defenses in Sinai. This final act of misdirection wasn't a gamble. It was calculated, backed by both planning and confidence. In fact, Sadat had tested the same technique just 3 weeks earlier, in Rome. In September 1973, Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi asked Sadat for help in avenging the downing of a Libyan passenger plane by Israel earlier that year. He asked Sadat for help in smuggling Libyan agents and missiles into Rome, with plans to shoot down an El Al airliner at the airport. Sadat approved the request, but with an ulterior motive. He tasked اشرف Marwan with assisting the Libyans in their infiltration, and then, once again, he ordered Marwan to leak the plot to the Mossad, ensuring it would be foiled before anyone was harmed. It was another performance engineered to boost Marwan's credibility as a reliable source.
He was so upset that even I became very upset. And then he said, there was no one spy. We were a group of 40 people whose task it was to feed the Israelis. There was no single double agent. There was Egypt.
Ahran Bregman, the professor who revealed اشرف Marwan's identity in 2002 and later offered to write his memoirs, recalled Marwan telling him, "I'm not Superman." The deception plan in 1973 was not carried out by me alone, but by many others as well. There was a team of 40 people whose mission was to feed the Israelis the conception, the belief that Egypt would not go to war before acquiring certain weapons. There was no single double agent. There was Egypt. According to Shimon Mendez, who served in the IDF Intelligence Directorate during the October War, bitterly observed, Sadat's Information Bureau prepared a poisonous dessert, and Marwan served it to us. And there are people among us that eat it delightfully to this very day. The Egyptian campaign is widely regarded as one of the most successful examples of strategic deception in modern military history. 50 years later, it remains a case study in military academies around the world, remarkable for achieving strategic surprise despite being under intense surveillance. Through calculated leaks, psychological manipulation, and meticulous planning, Egypt managed to outwit some of the world's most advanced intelligence services. As Eli Zera, former head of Israeli military intelligence, later admitted, the Egyptians deserved a commendation for bravery for their deception operation, which was executed with precision and secrecy that completely paralyzed Israel's intelligence apparatus.